In a country that loves official titles, where every factory worker has a rank and every street cleaner has a slogan, there is exactly one job that has never appeared in a Ministry of Labor handbook. Officially, it's a performance troupe. Practically, it's a state-run harem. Around 2,000 women, handpicked from high schools across North Korea, existed to keep the Kim family entertained, fed, massaged, and whatever else entertained might mean at 4 in the morning after a Hennessy bender. If you were a teenage girl in this country between 1978 and 2011, your school was a recruiting ground for it. Today, you find out what that job was, what it paid, and what it cost. Two strangers walked into your classroom today. You are 16. You are sitting in geography class in some unremarkable provincial city, and two men in their 40s walk in, hand your teacher a list of names, and ask the senior girls to step into the hallway. They do not introduce themselves. They do not explain anything. They are quiet, polite, and have absolutely no patience for follow-up questions. This is the recruitment arm of Section 5 of the Organization Department of the Workers' Party of Korea, and they have your name on a clipboard for reasons you have not yet been told. They measure your height, they check the shape of your hands and your ankles, they write down your father's job, your mother's family background, and how reliable your political record looks, all the way back to the 2nd grade. According to a classified North Korean recruitment document later published in Defector Testimony, every party branch in the country receives the selection criteria at the start of the school year. Local officials then visit senior girls' high schools and forward the top 100 candidates to Pyongyang. Of those, about 1 in 10 survives the medical inspection. The final national haul comes out to roughly 30 to 40 teenage girls a year, plus 15 boys, who will be brought along as servants and silent witnesses to whatever happens next. What your family is told that evening: your country has chosen you. There will be money, there will be status, maybe a new apartment in a slightly nicer block. Your parents will say yes, because saying no in this country tends to come with a complimentary stay in a labor camp. Even if the job were terrible, the alternative is worse, and that is the trick that holds the whole machine together. Every spring, the trick produces a fresh shipment of 16-year-olds packed onto a sleeper train to Pyongyang, headed for a job nobody on the train will explain, in a city most of them have never been allowed to visit. Section 5 decides if you're short enough. The first thing you discover at the central inspection in Pyongyang is that the whole selection process has the bedside manner of a cattle auction. They strip you, they measure you, they check for scars, they check for moles, they check for old vaccination marks. They ask, in front of strangers, whether you have ever had sex. They make you read a paragraph aloud to test the softness of your voice. They listen for the particular pitch of a young woman who could plausibly sing on demand at 3 in the morning while a senior official yells about karaoke. The criteria are absurd in a way that only despotism can produce. You must be a virgin, and there is a medical exam to confirm it. You must have no visible scars or birthmarks. You must have a soft, feminine speaking voice. You must have what the inspectors call a clean face, meaning unblemished skin and what the regime considers symmetrical features. And you must, under no circumstances, be taller than 165 centimeters. Defectors have explained the height rule with a single deadpan answer. Kim Jong-il was very, very short. The dictator was around 157 centimeters tall, give or take an inch in the lifts of his platform shoes, and he did not enjoy looking up at women. So an entire HR pipeline was built around making sure he never had to. Consider the case of a defector named Mi Hyung, who told her story to Marie Claire magazine in 2010. She was 15 when this happened to her. 2 officers in their 40s walked into her classroom, took her aside, examined her, asked her about her sexual history in front of 2 female aides, and informed her that her birth name sounded like a countryside girl. So they renamed her. The new name, the one she was told to answer to from now on, was Mi Hyang. Her old name, by the way, never appears in print. The North Korean state had already taken that too, and she was not allowed to say it out loud for the next decade. Welcome to the Joy Brigade. Your body belongs to the department now. The Pleasure Squad is not one squad. It is 3 teams, organized with the bureaucratic seriousness of any other state institution, and you will be assigned to exactly one of them, based on what the inspectors decide you are best at. The first team is the Kippumjo, the song and dance group. If you can carry a tune or remember choreography, congratulations, you will be performing show numbers at state banquets, hotel ballrooms, and the occasional palace dining hall. Think the world's least fun cruise ship circuit, except the cruise ship is a guarded compound. The audience is 12 sweating party officials, and one of them is the supreme leader, drunk and falling asleep in a chair while the band plays a song he requested 40 minutes ago. The second team is the Hangbokyo, the happiness team. This is the massage corps. You will spend your career rubbing the backs and shoulders of senior cadres who, for reasons best left unexamined, prefer their massages from teenage girls under the watchful eye of armed bodyguards. Officially, this work is non-sexual. Officially, The North Korean position on what counts as non-sexual is, broadly speaking, whatever the senior cadre says it is. The third team is the Manjokjo, the satisfaction team. This is the part of the pleasure squad that the North Korean state has spent over 40 years pretending does not exist. The Manjokjo provides sexual services to Kim, his closest associates, and selected guests. Defector accounts have described its existence repeatedly and in detail. The official North Korean position is that the entire Kippumjo is a slander invented by Western imperialists, which would be a more compelling defense if half a dozen former members had not already published their memoirs. You are not told which team you will be assigned to until your training begins. There is no mock interview, there is no career counselor, there is no aptitude test where you list your hobbies. They look at you, write a number on a card, and that decides your next 10 years. Your shot at being a Gamujo dancer instead of a Manjokjo concubine comes down to whether the right inspector liked the way you read a poem aloud on a Tuesday morning in March. Your first day at work involves a blood oath. Once you arrive at the training compound, somewhere in the gated residential zone of Pyongyang where regular citizens are not allowed, the onboarding process begins. It is not a normal HR onboarding. There is no slide deck about company values. There is no welcome lunch. There is no name tag. Instead, you are handed a needle, you prick your finger, and you write a pledge of allegiance to Kim Jong-il in your own blood. The pledge swears secrecy. It swears loyalty. It swears that you will never reveal anything about what you see, hear, or do during the next decade of your service to the state. Mihain described this in her testimony as the moment it actually hit her. She was now formally, contractually, on a list that ended in either death or another list. From the moment she signed, she was not allowed to write to her family. She was not allowed to call them. She was not allowed to send them postcards from her trips. Her parents could only assume she was alive based on the small monthly checks the state mailed to their village. They were not given an address. They were not even given a province. Then the training starts. 6 months of it. You are taught how to pour drinks at a state banquet. You are taught Russian and Korean folk dances. You are taught to recite poetry. You are taught how to massage. You are taught how to behave in the presence of generals, including the highly specific etiquette of laughing at the right joke, looking concerned at the right moment, and refilling a glass before being asked. Some of you, depending on your team, are taken abroad for extra polish. During the Soviet era, training trips reportedly included resorts in Eastern Europe, where the recruits were chaperoned by minders and not allowed off the property. The state pays for everything. The state owns everything you produce. The state owns you. At the end of training, you go to your first interview. That is what they call it. The interview is a one-on-one meeting with Kim Jong-il, in which he decides whether you make the final cut. Survive that, and you officially begin service. Fail it, and you go back to the training pool for reassignment, often into the lower status Hangbokjo team. Either way, your old life ended 6 months ago. Meet the boss. He's 5'3" and smells like Hennessy. Now consider the man you just swore yourself to. Kim Jong-il is, as already noted, exceptionally short. He wears platform shoes and a giant bouffant haircut to add the inches he wishes he had. He sleeps about 4 hours a night. He owns roughly 15 palaces, several of them connected by underground rail tunnels, because the supreme leader of an officially socialist republic apparently could not be expected to ride a regular elevator. His personal sushi chef, a Japanese man writing under the pseudonym Kenji Fujimoto, would fly to airports around the world to procure fresh ingredients, including live fish, so fresh that, as Fujimoto wrote in his best-selling memoir, the mouth was still gasping and the tail still thrashing when he served them. Kim drinks roughly a bottle of cognac a day. For 2 years in a row, he was reportedly the world's single largest individual buyer of Hennessy Paradis, importing somewhere between $650,000 and $800,000 worth of cognac annually, while millions of his own citizens were starving in the famine known as the Arduous March. He preferred Iranian caviar, Danish bacon, shark fin soup once a week, and rice grains that were, in his exact specification, absolutely uniform in size and color. Workers were assigned to inspect each grain by hand. He hated anchovies on pizza. His 10,000-bottle wine cellar leaned heavily on Bordeaux and Burgundy. He drank Asahi Superdry from Japan and Johnny Walker Black from Scotland. This is the man you exist to entertain. He likes American disco. He likes strobe lights. He likes Hollywood movies, and he loved them so much that in 1978 he kidnapped 2 South Korean filmmakers, the actress Choi Yoon-hee and her ex-husband, the director Shin Sang-ok, and held them in North Korea for nearly a decade so they could shoot films for him. Choi later wrote a memoir about her time in the country. She remembered him as charming, terrifying, and constantly drunk in a way that was somehow both very sad and extremely dangerous to be around. He lives in a private bubble of imported luxury, so fully divorced from the rest of the country that, by some accounts, he genuinely believed North Korea was thriving. The job of the pleasure squad is, in part, to keep that delusion intact. You are not just there to dance. You are there to be a fixture in the dictator's personal reality, a smiling, well-dressed prop in a country that, outside the palace gates, is rationing rice by the spoonful. The parties are worse than they sound. Imagine it is the spring of 1994, and the chef Fujimoto is invited, for the first time, to one of the leader's private parties at a residence in Pyongyang. He later writes about this evening in detail in a memoir that becomes a runaway bestseller in Japan. His description goes roughly as follows. Senior officials are lined up in formal suits along one side of a marble-floored ballroom. Loud disco music is playing through speakers expensive enough to wreck a small business. Kim Jong-il is presiding from a chair, sometimes drunk, sometimes laughing, sometimes shouting requests at the band. A row of young women in matching outfits enters the room. These are the Kippumjo and the Manjokjo combined, professionally trained and absolutely silent. At a certain point in the evening, Kim issues an order to the women. Take off your clothes. They do, because nobody in the room would dare not to. He then orders his guests to dance with them. The guests, who are senior generals and party officials, do as they are told. And then Kim delivers the only memorable rule of the evening, the one Fujimoto never forgets. Dancing is okay, but you cannot touch. If you touch, you are thieves. You are property. You are the dictator's property. Specifically, other men are allowed to look at you, but they cannot have you, because possession of you is one of the privileges that comes with being the boss. The South Korean actress Choi Yoon-hee attended a similar dawn party where Kim arrived with bloodshot eyes and slurred speech, having been drinking continuously since the previous evening, and demanded songs from a band of women in their 20s who looked, in Choi's recollection, half asleep on their feet. She remembered being terrified. The women, presumably, had stopped allowing themselves to be terrified about a year earlier, since fear was no longer a useful emotion in their daily routine, and would have shown up uninvited on their faces at the wrong moments. You don't get to call your mom, ever. Most jobs come with at least one phone call home. This one does not. From the moment you sign your blood oath, you are not allowed to contact your family. No letters, no phone calls, no visits, no photographs. They will not know where you are stationed. They will not know whether you are happy. They will not know whether you are still alive. The state will mail them small payments and pretend that is the same thing as a postcard. This isolation is not an accident. The whole point of the pleasure squad is to make sure no information ever leaves it. Members are housed in secure compounds, often in the gated suburb of Changwon in central Pyongyang, or at one of Kim's seaside compounds, including the famous Wonsan Villa on the eastern coast. Your daily life happens within a perimeter of soldiers, dogs, and electric fences. Some former members have estimated they spent 10 years of their lives without seeing the outside of a guarded courtyard, except in the back of a curtained car on the way to a banquet. If you are cooperative and good at your job, you accumulate small luxuries nobody else in North Korea can get. Imported skincare from Japan. Real meat. Fresh fruit out of season. Real coffee. You will eat better than 99% of your countrymen during a famine. You will also start to feel that you owe the state something, because gratitude is a useful tool for keeping people quiet, and the state is very good with tools. The really unsettling part of every defector account is the same. The women describe being well-fed and well-dressed, and at the same time describe wanting to die. The bodyguards are watching everything. The men patrolling those compounds were not strangers to the Kims. They were a hand-picked force called the Supreme Guard Command, and the most notable defector from their ranks is a man named Lee Young-guk, who served on Kim Jong-il's personal security detail from 1978 to 1988. He later wrote a tell-all memoir titled, I Was Kim Jong-il's Bodyguard, which predictably did not get a good review from the North Korean state. Lee's testimony is one of the few outside views into the daily life of the compounds where you would have lived. He describes a parallel staff, cooks, housekeepers, drivers, security men, and the pleasure squad itself, all rotating through the leader's many residences on a schedule that was changed at the last minute almost every day for security reasons. He describes Kim ordering his guards to stay armed and silent at parties, and he describes the strict, unwritten rule that guards were not allowed to make eye contact with the women. He also confirms one of the more unsettling details about retirement from the squad. A great many of the ex-Manjokjo were eventually married off to bodyguards exactly like him. The state liked the arrangement because both halves of the marriage were career-dependent on never speaking. A bodyguard who started talking would lose his privileges. A wife who started talking would put her husband in a labor camp. The result was a small population of married couples in central Pyongyang who, by every available account, did not actually discuss their previous lives with each other. They watched television, they ate dinner, they slept in separate rooms. They aged. Retirement means a microwave and an arranged marriage. You will not work in the pleasure squad forever. Officially, the retirement age is 22. Some defectors put the upper limit closer to 25. The exit interview is brief. You are paid a lump sum of roughly $4,000 US, give or take, which in the North Korean context is genuinely life-changing money. You receive a few imported home appliances, including a refrigerator and a microwave, both of which were luxury items inside the country during the 1990s and 2000s. You sign another secrecy oath, and then you are escorted out of the compound and, mostly, married off. The grooms are not random. Former Manjokjo members are typically married to senior officials in foreign affairs. Men cleared to travel internationally and trusted to keep the regime's secrets out of foreign hotels. Other retirees are paired with personal bodyguards from the Supreme Guard Command. The state arranges the marriages itself, because nobody who has spent a decade next to the supreme leader can be allowed to wander off and start a normal life with a normal husband. You are too valuable, and you know far too much. The smartest move is to attach you to a man whose own career depends on you never saying a word. A few defectors who escaped the system have described the transition as the strangest feeling of their lives. You go from being a state-owned object inside a palace to being a senior cadre's wife inside a state-issued apartment, without any of the time in between to figure out who you are. You are 22. You have not seen your parents in 7 years. You are now technically married to a man you barely know. Your old self does not exist anymore. The state took her, the way it took your name on day one of training. Kim Jong-il did not invent any of this. The really uncomfortable thing about the Kippumjo is that the format was not new. North Korea is a young state, but the structure it borrowed from is older than the United States. During the Joseon dynasty, which ran the Korean peninsula from 1392 to 1897, the royal court maintained a class of women known as Gunyo. The system was codified in 1428 by Sejong the Great. The same King Koreans now put on their largest banknote and credit with inventing the modern Korean alphabet. Gunyo did everything. They cleaned, they cooked, they sewed, they wrote calligraphy, they raised royal children, and, depending on rank and royal mood, some of them served as concubines. When Kim Il-sung's regime introduced the Kippumjo in 1978, the founder, Ri Dong-ho, then first vice director of the United Front Department, did not need to design the structure from scratch. He took a 15th century court arrangement, swapped out the silk hanbok for matching banquet outfits, swapped out the calligraphy lessons for cognac service training, and rebranded the whole institution in revolutionary language. The first batch of Kippumjo recruits served at the Munsu guest house in Pyongyang, entertaining Kim Il-sung. The original purpose, in other words, was to give a self-described socialist anti-monarchy the convenience of an actual royal harem, while pretending the institution was about modern dance. That is, broadly, how the rest of the regime works too. North Korea calls itself a republic. It runs as an absolute monarchy. The Kims pass power to their sons. They live in palaces, they keep concubines, they tax their peasants and starve them when the harvest fails. They simply use red flags instead of yellow ones, and put marks on the wall instead of Confucius. The wallpaper changes. The structure underneath is the same one Sejong the Great signed off on in the early 15th century. Kim Jong-il died in 2011. The squad was disbanded. Sort of. Kim Jong-il died of a heart attack on a moving train in December of 2011, reportedly while wearing his preferred all-weather jumpsuit. Within weeks, the pleasure squad attached to him was officially disbanded. Members were paid out, married off, and sent home. For about 3 years, while Kim Jong-un consolidated his power and held an extended public mourning period for his father, the institution went quiet, and outside observers assumed it might be one of the older traditions the new boss was willing to retire. That assumption did not survive 2014. Defectors and South Korean intelligence began reporting that the squad was being rebuilt, with officers once again visiting schools across the country looking for teenage girls. The new recruits were younger, in some reports as young as 13. The selection criteria reportedly relaxed slightly, since Kim Jong-un is a few inches taller than his father and apparently cares less about height than the previous administration. The numbers were smaller too. Where Kim Jong-il had reportedly maintained around 2,000 women across his network, his son's version is closer to 200. The Wonsan compound, the seaside palace where Kim Jong-un is rumored to spend large stretches of the year, has reportedly hosted parties for the new generation of recruits. The rules, by all accounts, are roughly the same as they were in 1994, when Kenji Fujimoto first walked in. Drink the cognac. Dance to the disco. Do not touch the women without permission. And, if you are one of the women in the room, forget by morning whatever you remember from the night before, because the next train of new recruits is already on its way to Pyongyang. So, how was your day at work? So that was your life. You were 16 when 2 strangers showed up at your classroom and decided you fit the criteria. You spent 6 months pricking your finger and learning Russian folk dances. You spent the next decade in a guarded compound on a strict diet of imported skincare and forced silence. You met the supreme leader of your country, who told you to dance for his guests but not be touched by them. You retired at 22 with $4,000 and a microwave. You were married off to a bodyguard whose name was given to you on the day of the wedding. Your old name does not exist anymore. You will not be allowed to publish a memoir unless you defect. And if you defect, you will spend the rest of your life answering interview questions from foreign journalists who are mostly interested in the cognac. Most North Korean teenagers, of course, never became Kippumjo. Most of them lived through the famine, worked in factories, and never saw a banquet hall in their lives. The pleasure squad was the gilded version of the country's bargain with its citizens. The version with imported caviar instead of starvation. It was still a cage. The cage just had better wallpaper, a bigger refrigerator, and a small monthly delivery of European face cream. If anyone asks you what you used to do for a living, the correct answer, even years after retirement, even after the supreme leader is dead, even after the compound has been bulldozed and the cognac glasses sold off to a private collector in Macau, is that you were a performance artist. That is the line they trained you to repeat. Stick to it. The state remembers everything, and the state has been remembering since 1428.